Hello, my name is Amanda Verlander, and I'm going to be giving a presentation today about human performance technology and its particular uses in higher education when dealing with military students. Some of the things that we're going to be talking about is why human performance technology is so needed in military education, as well as the ways it is currently being utilized to benefit military students. And then lastly, we're going to end on why more human performance technology is necessary to help improve military student education. So the first thing that we need to talk about when we're talking about human performance technology in military education is why it's needed. But before we even go into why it's needed, let's talk about and define what a military student is. A military student can fall into a couple different categories. One of which is a active duty service member, so that is their full-time job. Their entire attention needs to be around their military service. So anything that they're going to be called up on, if they are in a position of leadership, if they have one of their soldiers contact them, there's going to be a lot of challenges that are going to be unique to active duty military members. But on top of active duty military members, you already also have your reserve or guard service members that serve in a more part-time capacity. That's not their full-time job, but they still have their service commitment to the military, and there's going to be a lot of challenges and requirements for them to conduct that military service that higher education has to take into consideration. And you also have veterans. Now, those are people who have already concluded their military service, so they don't have some of these challenges that the active duty and reserve components are going to have, but they're going to have other ones that might be a little bit more complicated due to the conclusion of their military service. But we're going to get into that in a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about another little caveat, and that is the dependents of military service members, the spouses or children. And so a lot of these things are going to apply to them because they're going to have some of the same challenges. They're going to have some military education benefits that are going to apply to them. So when we refer to military students, it's important that you understand that we're referring to a wide variety of students that are going to have some kind of connection to the military. So now that we've talked about what military students are, let's talk about how or why human performance technology is going to help them in higher education. And first of all is the fact that their retention rates are low compared to civilian students. And so one of the ways that human performance technology can help military students is helping them improve those retention rates. And additionally, as we've talked about a little bit when we talked about military students, is they have very unique needs and challenges that are not going to be found in your traditional civilian students. So there's classification of non-traditional. You do have some non-traditional civilian students. However, these military non-traditional students are going to have challenges and things that are going to apply to them that will not apply to any of the other students that you see on a higher education campus. So let's find ways that human performance technology can benefit them and help them. So one of the biggest things that human performance technology can be utilized in order to benefit military students is to improve their retention rates. They have found that by implementing different human performance technology, there's been a lot of improvements for military students, and that includes counteracting some of these problems that they have. So one of the research conducted by Dillard and Yu in 2016 found that they're having a much higher rate of attrition for military students than any of their civilian students. So that's a problem that needs to be addressed by the higher education administration. And human performance technology is just one of the ways in which that they can do that. One of the things that we need to understand here is that they are considered a non-traditional student, which is one of the reasons their attrition rates are higher. That's because they are older than a traditional student. They're more likely to have a family, and they're more likely to be working a full or a part-time job. And so this is going to create a lot of challenges and obstacles that are harder for military students to overcome in order to pursue their academic goals. And so it's important that higher education institutions understand that and provide resources and services that are unique to military students in order to help them overcome those challenges. And so when you have military students graduating in a very significant rate lower than civilian students, then there's an obvious need there for there to be additional programs and assistance for these military students so that they can also achieve their academic goals along with their civilian student counterparts. So as we mentioned a minute ago about a military student's unique needs, we're going to go a little bit more in depth into that. And the reason that they're not considered to be like a traditional civilian student. These military students have a lot of complicated issues that are unique to their military service, and so there are mental and emotional concerns that traditional students are just not going to have, and that weighs really heavy on a student. And so we can see in so many different research and instances where when there's a lot more going on in a student's life, it makes their academics take kind of a back burner, and it can just overwhelm them and make them it can make them a lot more disheartened that they can't complete their academic goals. So we want to take into consideration their mental and emotional concerns. But from a strictly administrative perspective, we have their special military education benefits. And those are going to require a lot more training and knowledge on behalf of the higher education institution, because military students, while they have these benefits, may not always know everything about utilizing them at that institution. And so it's really important that there are staff members that are completely trained in how to recognize what these benefits are, who would be eligible, how it's processed, what are the deadlines and paperwork involved, and there's a great deal of background knowledge that's really required for military students to be able to utilize their education benefits. So we have to understand that that's something that military students are going to have that are unique to them. Traditional civilian students typically just go through financial aid, and everything that they need is standard. Well, military students don't have standardized benefits, and so those are going to require specialized attention and services. So we also have the fact that we need to take into consideration their military commitments. And so that's going to really require the cooperation of the entire institution, faculty and staff alike. And it's really important that the administration and leadership at the institution develop policies that are going to be friendly towards these military commitments, because when a student is called up and they have no control over what the military is requiring them to do, they need the college or university to come around them and say, hey, we can help you get through this. Here's what we're going to do. And so it's really important that we utilize human performance technology in higher education to address these concerns and these unique needs and provide services and policies that are there to help them so that they can still pursue a college in spite of or in addition to their military service. The next portion is probably one of the most important aspects of this presentation. Military students are going to have very specific needs regarding with their mental, emotional, and physical health that human performance technology can be used in order to address. And so when we look at these students, they're struggling with things that civilian students don't have to struggle with. In fact, Basari and some other authors in 2017 conducted some research and found some really disturbing trends among military students as far as their mental health. They found that as a direct result of their military service, they were more likely to be struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder, among some other mental illness concerns. And so although post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is the most commonly known complication, unfortunately it is almost kind of a stigmatized term that's being applied to military students that isn't always fair or applicable, and people need to understand more about it. And so that's something that human performance technology can be used to address. We can help counteract some of the discrimination and stereotypes that come with military service members, but when there is true PTSD there, we can also find ways in which to address that and help military students overcome that and still be able to pursue higher education. So in addition to that, there's also an actual physical and mental injury called traumatic brain injury, or TBI. And so a lot of combat veterans in particular, just like PTSD, but this is an injury that is a direct result of a blast or some kind of blow to the head that they've had in connection with their military service. So there's going to be a lot of challenges with some of these as far as some of the mental capacities that they may struggle with doing their academics. And so by establishing some policies for faculty members, be like, these are the provisions you're allowed to apply to these military students to help them overcome these issues. Stuff like that. That can really be a way that human performance technology can be utilized to help these students overcome those issues. So, they also found in research by Norman and other authors in 2015 that the emotional concerns for military students are something that are not being taken as seriously as they need to be in society. And we found that 46% of military students, almost half of our military student population, has had suicidal thoughts. But even more disturbingly, we have found that 20% of those military students have gone so far as to develop an actual plan for committing suicide. And so that is something that both faculty and staff alike desperately need to understand and know about military students if they're going to help them get their academic goals. And so higher education institutions can really do a lot to address these concerns and help these military students. And furthermore, there are actual physical injuries that these students may be having to overcome in order to pursue their higher education. So there's just so many different things that are specific to military students that sadly aren't often being addressed. And I find that the suicidal rate in particular is just incredibly concerning. And when you look at the statistics, that almost 22 veterans a day, or that would apply to active duty as well, that 22 service members a day commit suicide. This has to be a plan for higher education institutions to address this and to find ways that they can help these military students and to perhaps help them through what they've gone through and help them get their higher education goals achieved, and through that be able to overcome some of these problems and be able to come out on the other side a lot healthier and a lot more prepared to do things out in the world. Another unique need to military students is their utilization of specialized military education benefits. And that is something that higher education institutions absolutely have to be prepared to address. And human performance technology can go a long way to helping train faculty and staff on how to utilize these military benefits. So it's not always addressed, but it really needs to be. And I have even found that at some smaller institutions, there may be only one person who has any knowledge about military education benefits, and whereas you have institutions like Liberty University that are much larger, and they have a great population of military students, and so they have an entire office dedicated to dealing with that. And so all higher education institutions have to have some kind of preparation to dealing with these military students, and because it is their responsibility to process this and send this information either to the Veterans Affairs Department or to their particular unit. And so we're going to talk about the 3 specific military education benefits that are most likely to be utilized by military students. You have your GI Bill, and the GI Bill is actually several different ones that are processed in different ways, and they pay for different things at different rates. And so each GI Bill needs to be understood and what forms go along with it. What are the deadlines? Is it being paid directly to the school, or is it being paid directly to the student? What are the qualifications for the student to meet that need or to meet that education benefit? Because not all military students qualify for all these education benefits. How much of the benefits do they have? There's a lot of technical components that come around to utilizing these education benefits that colleges and universities absolutely have to be prepared to answer and to know how to process. So you have their GI Bill, you have tuition assistance, and that is money that comes directly from the service member's unit to help pay for their education. But there are really strict deadlines and paperwork and things that need to be filled out for that. And then there's also specialized scholarship. There's a lot of states that came out and have provided free tuition if a service member enlists in that particular state and joins the military, and they come back to that state and pursue their higher education. So they could then receive free tuition. So there are certain benefits that are offered specifically to military students, but we have to understand how higher education institutions are going to be able to provide the resources necessary to process this. And it actually, even in addition to this, you have the different education benefits, and this is all unique to the particular higher education institution, but a lot of these institutions will actually provide academic credit for their military service, and how that's evaluated and applied also has to be handled by specific individuals trained to understand and know how to do that. So there's a lot of parts that go into helping these military students use their military education benefits. And while the military does provide some training to these service members about their benefits, you have some GI Bills, like the new post 9/11 GI Bill, that can actually be transferred from the service member to their either spouse or their children. And so this is one of the only military or education benefits that's allowed to be transferred like that. And so, but they're not always eligible to do that. And so this requires a lot of knowledge from somebody within the staff of an institution to know how to process this and to answer a lot of questions, because you have spouses and children coming saying, hey, I want to use this benefit, and they may not have any idea if they're eligible or can do so. So it is really important that these students are able to use their education benefits in that institution, and that the institution provides the means necessary so that they can use them there. Another unique thing that needs to be addressed by higher education is the awareness that there are specific requirements that service members have related to their military service that higher education institutions need to be able to address and work around. And so it's complicated because only 1% of the population in the United States actually serves in the military. And so that doesn't leave a whole lot of people working in higher education or even just in society that have had a whole lot of interactions with somebody who is actually serving or has served or part of the military community in general. And so that because they haven't had that direct interaction and that knowledge of military service, it usually leaves them very unaware of what kind of challenges they're facing. Military service members work jobs that have very irregular hours. Their schedule is very dynamic. They can be required at any given time to be serving on a 24-hour shift or to work later hours or show up early or show up here, wherever, that they have no control over. When somebody that is above them at a higher rank and is their supervisor and in charge of them says, hey, you're going to go do this, service members do not have the option to say no or to do otherwise. They can actually be sent to prison. They can be court-martialed if they don't follow their orders. And so sometimes people just aren't aware that that's something that they can't, that they can't change. When they're told to do something, they absolutely have to do it. And so this can be really complicated when professors are frustrated that military students aren't turning their assignments in on time or have not committed or completed any work in a certain time period. And that might be a direct result of their military service. These service members are sent on deployments at sometimes just a few hours' notice. And so that is something that they don't have any control over. And so when they're required to fly halfway around the world and they don't know how long they're going to be there, if they're going to have access to phones or internet or computers, and especially with the security concerns, there are a lot of service members who are deploying overseas who are not allowed to take computers with them. In fact, earlier this year, there was a couple units that were deployed over to Iraq and Afghanistan that they were not allowed to take cell phones. They were not allowed to take computers. They were not allowed to have any of that on them. And they were all activated and deployed within just like a day or two. And so when you look at this group and understand that there are going to be some of these individuals who've been, that were enrolled in higher education, well, then what? Obviously, it's not their responsibility that they can't perform their academic requirements. So higher education institutions need to be aware and understand that that's part of their job, that's part of their responsibility, and they've got to find ways to work around that. Additionally, on top of just the deployments, they can be required to be sent away for training for weeks on end, months on end sometimes. There's special schoolings that will have a slot open up, and then suddenly they just have to go. And so there's a lot of things that are a direct result of their and this is going to mostly apply to active duty service members, but can also apply to the reserve and guard members as well. But they don't have the chance, or they don't have the choice to say no or to decline. When the military says they go, and that was part of their requirement when they enlisted, and that's just part of their military service. And so higher education institutions need to be friendly and considerate of that service and those requirements, and find ways to work around military students. And human performance technology is a great way that can be implemented here to educate everybody at the institution about these particular needs and challenges that they have to overcome in order to finish their academic goals. Now that we've covered why human performance technology can be so successful and is so desperately needed in military education, we're going to discuss some of the ways that it's currently been used. You have some institutions utilizing it to promote military-friendly policies across the board. You have specialized staff and faculty training. It just gets everybody on board with the same amount of knowledge about military students across an entire institution. You have designated military offices that have representatives that are completely trained on how to help military students with their problems that they're going to have, and what resources are available to them and how they can use those resources. And then you also have exclusively military student courses. This is one of the smaller benefits smaller ways that HPT is being used, but it is really interesting. And so you also have information that's come out from research by Basari and the other authors that 40% or 46% of students that had military-specific programs offered to them were more likely to utilize them. And so this is really important for higher education institutions to take into consideration, because if these programs are there, more often than not, military students will be able to use them. But if there's no such support service offered, a lot of times they don't even use the traditional services that are there. So it's really important for institutions to take that into consideration. As we discussed a little bit earlier, as far as a very fundamental and foundational part of any institution with implementing HPT into military education is to provide military-friendly policies. This is going to have to be something that everybody cooperates with across the entire institution. They have to have policies in place that are as individual to each specific department and how they would interact with military students. Financial aid is going to have specific policies related to military students. And some of these are already foundational to law. There are some policies that have been secured already that a higher education institution can actually get into a lot of trouble for not implementing, but it's important that they understand that and know that. And so there are ways that higher education institutions can utilize different policies, though, to promote a really military-friendly campus. As far as when it comes to their academics, as we mentioned earlier, you may have a student that's in the middle of a class and they get deployed. Well, what is that institution's policy regarding that? Are they going to fail it? Is it going to be an incomplete? What happens to their education benefits at that point? What's been paid out? And so there needs to be a lot of understanding across the board, across the entire institution, about what these policies are. So when students ask questions about it and they have concerns, and again, you may have some of these students that have a few hours notice that they're going on deployment and they're trying to make a phone call in an airport somewhere saying, hey, I'm getting deployed. What do I do with my classes? And so sometimes these are really odd hours. And so you need to have everybody educated in order to answer those questions as quickly and efficiently as possible as to what that military student needs to do. So these policies are really important, but the most important part of these policies is that they're communicated and instructed to the entire institution. And so these policies are probably the most foundational aspect of helping military students with their performance in higher education. A really interesting method of human performance technology that's been utilized for military students is offering military-only classrooms. Now, traditionally, the research that's been conducted on this has shown that it's been most often applied to literature, like grammar classes, in the early undergraduate courses. But they're a really interesting way of providing a safe place for military students. Research that was conducted by Starglass in 2015 found that a lot of military students have suffered from a lot of discrimination and stereotyping due to the military service. And we mentioned this earlier in the presentation, but it's really significant here because when we're talking about literature classes in particular, where students are required to write about their experiences and their lives, and it's really difficult for military students to do that and to open up about what they've done and what's been required of them if they feel like they're going to be judged as a result of that service. And the particular political climate that our society is in right now has made this even more difficult for our military students. Because unfortunately, while the political divide has separated us, the problem is a lot of military requirements are kind of being lumped into these military sides. And so if somebody disagrees with a particular administration or a particular policy or deployment or whatever that's been enacted, they kind of take it out on the service member like they had a choice in what they were doing. And so it's really unfair that a lot of these military students have been discriminated against and stereotyped as having like PTSD or some other kind of traumatic event. And so it's really important that military students feel like they can connect with the other students. And so we've seen that in particular for veterans, those that are not currently serving, and they're doing this transition into civilian life straight out of the military, it can be extremely difficult for them. And it can play into those mental, emotional challenges that we mentioned earlier, to not have that kind of community that they had in the military. And so these military-specific classes can offer students the ability to write and be open and talk about what they've done, where they've gone, what they've been through, but to develop a camaraderie with these other military students. And so building community is going to be really important for them to be able to succeed and push past all the obstacles and challenges that they're going to be facing. And so this class has been extremely successful when there's a professor who is facilitating the class that has also been in the military and is a veteran, or even somebody who's currently serving, but somebody who's going to understand what these students have gone through, and to just provide a space where they can complete their academic requirements, but to do so in a way that's free for them to express exactly who they are. And so this has been a really interesting and successful way that human performance technology has been implemented to benefit military students. So it also goes to note that these military students aren't connecting with traditional students very well. In fact, that Basari study mentioned earlier, military students were stated to have felt that they were alienated from their civilian peers, that they had trouble relating to them, and honestly got very frustrated with them due to their immaturity or perhaps a flippant comment or question that was made related to their military service. So I found this to be one of the most important aspects that higher education institutions could look at as far as implementing human performance technology at their institution. The most successful and most prominently used human performance technology in military education is utilizing a professional development training that is given to all faculty and staff that encompasses all the complexities that are surrounding military students. This foundational knowledge is really beneficial because everybody understands in a particular institution what these military students are having to face, how the institution wants to address those challenges, and what the military student needs to do in order to overcome them. And so providing that training really helps everybody always give the student the same answer. And so a lot of different research, like from Dillard and Yu, found that students felt a great deal of frustration when they were trying to communicate with different people within different staff or even faculty regarding their military service or something that was coming up with their academics, and they were given different answers depending on who they were talking to, and that was really frustrating and difficult for students to overcome, and would help contribute to student attrition. And so we want to make sure that everybody is completely educated on these different the different policies and different problems, so that they can really help these military students succeed. And so, an additional research that was conducted by Morris and Beatty in 2018, that the training that was implemented, and these are just a couple of the research articles that I found for this presentation, but there's so many more out there that show that these have actually been utilized in certain institutions and were found to be extremely beneficial. And so students reported back that they had a much higher satisfaction rating. And so things like that will really help contribute to military student retention. And that's the overall goal here, is to help military students succeed with their academics. And so having this training provided to everybody is a cost-efficient way of providing, a human performance technology to help improve military student retention. But it also helps them to just meet and serve military students where they need it. And so this is one of the most commonly used technologies out there, but it is also unfortunately kind of downplayed its importance and use in higher education. Unfortunately, not all higher education institutions offer this, but honestly, it's going to be one of the most vital things that an institution can offer military students is a designated office or representatives that are there to meet military student needs. And so it seems like a very simple human performance technology, but unfortunately, a lot of institutions still don't utilize that. And so a lot of these students aren't directed to the particular military representatives out there, and different staff or faculty will try to deal with that particular challenge or obstacle or whatever on their own, and that provides a lot of the confusion that we talked about before, with students not getting the same answer. And so it can be extremely frustrating, but when dealing especially with those military education benefits that we discussed, those require a lot of specialized training and certifications that are required in order to process those benefits at that particular institution. So when military students want to use that, in particular the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit, it's a brand new benefit. It's brand new, but it's been out there for 10 years, and military students have been able to use it. However, there are changes quite frequently to try to just improve the overall performance of the GI Bill. But there's a lot of caveats as far as who can use it, how they can use it, why they can use it, where they can use it. And so without a lot of that training and that up-to-date training, staff is often confused and uninformed about what are the current policies related to that GI Bill. And so in particular, I've seen friends of mine who are military spouses trying to utilize their husband's GI Bill benefit, and some of these institutions are giving out inaccurate information. They don't know how they can even process. They expect the student to know and be able to do more than is actually required of them. The VA actually requires a great deal from the institution itself. And so having a specific office and having specific representatives there that understand that and know how to help these military students is really crucial, because a lot of military students will get in there, they'll be told, hey, just do financial aid for now, we'll do your GI Bill later, and they'll get in debt, and they won't have meant to get into debt in order to pay off their education benefits, and that'll just make them want to give up and not complete their academic goals, or to just be told that, just to be told a lot of inaccurate information. It's discouraging, and for a lot of these students that are non-traditional, have a whole lot else going on, it can just add more stress and obstacles than they're really able to overcome at that time in order to achieve their academic goals. And so, in fact, research completed by Gibbs, Lee, and Gonbari in 2019 found that military offices and representatives were vital to the success of military students in higher education. Finally, we want to discuss where there's room for improvement when utilizing human performance technology in military education. There's been a lot of great strides, improvements made, but there could be so much more done to really help these military students. Cade and Albright found in 2015 that They were conducting research and found that there was a method of using cutting edge human performance technology as training methods for their faculty and staff that showed tremendous promise with how their faculty and staff were then able to relate and deal with their military students. And again, in 2017, research conducted by Culkin found that human performance technology was especially essential when utilizing e-learning platforms for military students. And primarily, military students attend in a distant learning format because it's more efficient for them, especially if they're on active duty status. Now, that's changed a little bit with the new post 9/11 GI Bill benefit because there were additional monies paid out to students if they attended residentially. But after a couple years, they actually changed that, and students who were attending completely online were still able to collect some monies from that. So let's change that dynamic a little bit. But overall, more military students attend higher education in an online platform than they do in a residential. So human performance technology can just be utilized in such a more widespread way to really address the problems that military students are facing and to improve their retention rates. There's a lot of research that's shown that the need is there and that some of the times that it's been implemented has really shown improvement, but there's so much more research that can be conducted to find new human performance technology methods. But especially what specific benefits were the outcome of that human performance technology and what didn't work and what could work a lot better. And so there's a lot more room for more research to be conducted, a lot more different technology to be developed so they can be used. There's just a whole lot more room for growth here. And while it's been really beneficial for military students, I think we can do so much more overall in higher education to provide the resources necessary and the student support services to just really help military students overcome all that they're doing in service to our country and to be successful in higher education. This concludes my presentation today on human performance technology and military students. I hope that it has expanded your understanding of military students and the need that they have for more support services and just the potential that human performance technology has to open up doors and help military students overcome specific challenges and obstacles that are unique to them in their service to our country. And I really hope that this will help challenge administrators and higher education institutions in particular to utilize that human performance technology so that overall we can really help boost the retention rates of military students throughout all of higher education through the use of human performance technology. And I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this presentation, and thank you.